Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on databases and FME. My name is Robin Rennie, and I work in our Professional Services Department. With me today is Don Murray.
Hi there.
Co-founder and president of Safe Software. And today we're going to be giving you an overview of what you can do with FME in terms of interacting with your databases. We're going to demonstrate some workspaces and use the database tools to display the results. But first, just a brief overview of who Safe Software is and what FME does. So I'll hand this over to Don for that.
Okay, so next slide there. Perfect.
Great, there we go.
Okay, it's Safe. We're located, we talk about a secret headquarters in Vancouver. That's really because we're located in Surrey, but nobody knows where Surrey is. It's a suburb of Vancouver. So in fact, if you scour Vancouver looking for Safe Software, you're going to come up empty-handed. Yes. The company's made up of comewhere around 95 to 100 employees. It fluctuates as we have lots of university students and co-ops.
I was going to say, how come we never know exactly how many people we have?
I know. Especially as a company that moves data, you think we'd be able to figure that one out, wouldn't you? Yeah. So we have lots of fun. Anybody who's seen us on the road knows we have a lot of fun. People might think that moving data isn't very exciting, but actually it's a lot of fun. And we're going to have some fun this morning. We really work hard. At Safe, we talk about the restaurant model a lot, and that's to have a happy customer. We want happy customers. We don't necessarily want customers who are happy. There's a slight difference there. And to do that, you have to not only work to have a really great product, but you also have to work to have very great service. And Robin, I'm happy Robin's here doing this because she's responsible for the desktop side of our support. And so if you have any, if you're not happy with the product or our service, please let us know. We're a unique company in the spatial world. Really, we're the only company who's dedicated their entire being to moving data. Mm-hmm. And with that, you can see on this slide here, you can see all the different data formats that we support. Right now, it's somewhere over 287. Those are the ones that we shipped in FME 2012. There's many others from third parties, and with 2013, it promises to be even more. And you can see all the different types of spatial and non-spatial data we do there. So while we grew up moving spatial data, if you want to move non-spatial data, we can do that too. And that's why we sort of call out corporate DB. So that could be databases, Excel files, CSV files, flat text files, old Fortran, column-aligned text files.
Yep. Oh, and then of course you've got XML. That's not spatial, right? That's just flat.
XML is the cat's meow when it comes to data, I got to tell you, Robin.
But it's not really what you'd call spatial data. You can't visualize it on a map. It's what most of us would think about as sort of non-spatial data with spatial components in it.
That's right. I'm glad you brought up XML.
I just thought you'd like that.
That's right.
So then of our 400 plus data transformation tools, probably well over half of those are not related to geometries at all. They're doing things like attribute splitting or substring extracting or working with your attribute data in ways to make it fit the model that you're trying to get it into.
Yeah, in particular, that's right. In particular, today we're talking about databases, and as we all know, that much of what's in databases is not spatial. So if we only focused on the spatial aspects of database technology, we really wouldn't be that useful. So
that's what we're going to show you a bit today. So we're going to be talking about spatial, non-spatial, intermixed, and really everything that we show that applies to spatial works just as well on your non-spatial anyway, so it should all be good. So before we go too much further, we'd like to know a little bit about you guys.
Okay, so I'm in charge of the polls here.
So Don's going to pull up some polls that just ask you some questions, and the first one should be, what database formats are you using?
What database do you use? Okay.
So can we see that on our screen here, Don?
So launch the poll. Yeah, I see it up here.
Okay.
So we should be able to see the people voting. Yep. Okay. Wow, it's coming in. Oracle and Microsoft SQL Server are neck and neck. Okay. Oracle's pulling in the lead. We're going to go for another 3 seconds here. Okay. 3. Okay. 2. 1. I'm going to close the poll. Okay, and I'll share the results with you. And you can see 70% of you use Oracle. Oops, sorry. I just kicked Robin there. 53% use Microsoft SQL Server. PostGIS was 29%. IBM DB2, 3%. And 19% use other. So if you voted other, if you could let us know via email or on the chat what database you use, that would be really really valuable. We do support others, of course, like Sybase and Spatial Light and SQLite. And
that's right, but it's always interesting for us to find out what people do have out there. So, so that's great, Don. So what about the next one? We want to know how long people have used FME for. And
okay.
Now, in this question, one of the answers has to do with the data interoperability extension. So if you are an ESRI customer and you've been using the data interoperability extension, we'd also like to know that. We won't be covering anything to do with the data interop today or geodatabases either, because we have other webinars that deal with that.
And typically in these webinars, I'm not looking at the results, we get about 20% of the people who have not used FME at all. So we'll go another 3 seconds, 2, 1, and we will see if my prediction is right. So we'll share the results. Oh, close, 17% have not used FME or the data interoperability extension. So for you folks out there, we have an introductory weekly webinar that talks about FME, and you can see the things there. 42% use it for more than 3 years, and then 30 for 6 months to 3 years, and then 10% for less than 6 months. So
excellent.
Great.
Yeah, so we'll show you towards the end some places you can go to get to more information and some weekly, as Don mentioned, the weekly introduction to FME, which is a great place to get started. So the third poll we're just going to ask you about now before we get started is, what kind of data do you store in your databases? And here we're not interested in personnel, shipping, inventory stuff.
No.
What we want to know is it spatial data that you've got there, non-spatial. How many of you are storing raster data in your databases so that we can see what the call is for that kind of thing?
Yeah, because one thing that's coming out in 2013. Yeah, we are getting
you
years all
doing a
mixed up.
spoiler alert here, Don?
Oh, I'm going to keep quiet, because you're right. It's raster in a database.
That's right, and we don't want to go giving things away, otherwise they'll all leave.
Yeah, you know what they say: loose lips sink ships, right?
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to close this poll here, and we're going to share the result. And there you go. 93% of you are storing spatial data in your database. Not surprising you, a lot of you are also storing non-spatial data, and that's quite a common thing. You'll have a corporate database, spatial in a database, non-spatial in a database, and raster. That's a pleasant surprise, really.
That's actually a higher number than I would have expected.
Exactly.
So that's great.
Exactly. And other, again, let us know what that other is. I expect it's probably XML.
Oh, probably. And I did. We were going to bring that up a little bit later, but yeah.
It's all XML to me, though, as you know, Robin.
I know. Most of you who have sat through any of our webinars will know that Don is into his XML.
And I'll tell you a little secret. If you remove the M from XML, you get XL, and we read that too.
We do. I thought you might have meant that was extra large.
Yeah.
Okay, so that helps us to get to know our audience a bit, because putting these things together, it's very one-sided. I'm sitting here in a room talking to myself, but it's good to know that you're out there with all. Oh, Don's here, of course. So here's our agenda of what we hope to cover in the next short while. We'll go over interacting with our databases with the various readers and writers which we have, and we'll show some of the advanced capabilities of these. We'll take a look at some of the transformers which were designed explicitly for database interaction, and we'll show you how regular database functionality can be incorporated into the FME workflows. We'll take a sneak peek at what's coming in FME 2013, and then we'll just do a quick demo showing the level of sophistication which is available by integrating our two products, FME Desktop and FME Server. And so when we get a bit closer to that, I might get Don to tell us a bit about FME Server, because that's also one of his great loves.
Yep.
So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording, the slides, and the various workspaces that I show will be available after the webinar. So don't panic about that. You'll get lots of good stuff, and we have a lot to show, so if you're finding it a bit overwhelming, you will get the recording afterwards.
Yep, and if you go to YouTube FME channel, you'll also be able to see it cut up into pieces there too.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So that'll be good. We'd like you to ask questions. We've got Dan Eisminger, another member of our professional services team, and Paul Nalos, our database development team leader, both online and ready to answer your toughest questions. Fire them away at Paul, because that way he gets to know where he should get our database development going. So to submit a question, you just open up the questions box in the GoToWebinar pane and type away, and one of those two will answer your questions. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll send you a follow-up email with any answers that we think might be appropriate. So again, don't feel badly if we don't get to you. We've got about a couple of hundred people on here, so if they all answer questions, Dan and Paul will be pretty busy.
Yeah.
So this is just a list of the databases that we currently support, and you'll notice there's a dot, dot, dot at the bottom because I'm not sure I did actually get all of them.
Yeah.
The three we're going to be interacting with today are Oracle, SQL Server, and then a combination of PostGIS. And of course, both Oracle and SQL Server we have non-spatial and spatial reader writers for. PostGIS is the non-spatial reader there, and PostGIS is the spatial reader writer.
That's right.
Then we have a lot of webinars on rather more specific databases, so we won't be covering any of this stuff today, but if you go to the webinars website, you can find webinars on ESRI databases. I think we did one on G-Technology and Geomedia, right?
Yeah.
We've done some wonderful work with Small World, so you could go take a look at those webinars if that's your database of interest. Yeah. Okay, so long list there, and we're adding new ones all the time.
Yeah, like Salesforce on your list there, and CloudDB.
I know. I think I did a bit of 2013 stuff right here because these two at the bottom, they're not in 2012.
Yeah, so that's good.
Cool. So we have another couple of poll questions for you.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Yeah. So Don, back to the. Whoops.
The polls. Okay.
Actually, maybe not. I've got one more slide first.
Okay.
What we're going to be using today for all our work is FME 2012 Service Pack 3. Service Pack 4 is coming out in the next little while, but Service Pack 3 is the latest one that's available. We're going to be using PostSQL and PostGIS, and I've put down here that it's not 2.0. It's whatever I had on my machine and I forgot to check. So I think it's about 1.9.
Right, but 2.0 is, again, supported in FME 2013. So
that's right.
Yeah.
To work with those kind of products, PostgIS, SQL, and PostGIS, and the non-spatial formats, you just need a professional level license. The databases that I'm going to be hitting today, we've got an Oracle 11G and a SQL Server 2008. And if you're going to be doing writing to those enterprise spatial databases, then you do need a database edition license, so a higher level license for writing to the enterprise spatial databases. Right. Okay, now comes your turn, Don. So this time we wanted some information about you and your work processes. So we have two rather interesting questions that we put together here, which you'll probably have a bit of a chuckle about. But the first one is, what frustrations do you have with your database workflows? But most particularly the ones that don't involve FME. Because we don't want to hear that you're frustrated with FME. So what do you think?
Yeah, okay, so Robin's kidding. If you do have frustrations about FME, I heard once somebody say, if you have frustrations with FME, tell us. If you love FME, tell everybody else.
That's right.
Okay, so please do tell us where we can improve FME. We have a big team here. So anyway, we'll let the polls go for a few more seconds, 2, 1, okay. Well, okay, people are starting to really vote now. Okay, so there we go. Okay, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, close poll, share results, and need to create a workflow for every database scenario. Need to spend time working through a DBA. That's the biggest one. No surprise there. And need to create intermediate files. Need to know SQL and how to use it. So that's
great, because we're going to cover off on a bunch of those things today. Unfortunately, I don't think you can ever get away without knowing some SQL, and we'll show some tools that make use of that. But we certainly hope that we can help you get around that DBA, and I hope there's no DBAs listening.
That's right.
Telling this
That's right. Absolutely.
And then the second question in this section was, what database activities do you use or want to use FME for?
What database activities you use, and this is pretty much the last poll, I think, other than the free training. Am I allowed to talk about that one?
I don't know. You're just giving away the end of this something fierce.
I know. So yeah, okay. Look at this: writing data to databases, reading, data validation. Data validation is huge, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because that's one thing. Again, for 2013, we take to a whole new level. So
yeah.
So okay. So in 4, 3, 2, 1. Close poll, share results, and there you go. It's a pretty even split, but writing data databases and reading is number 1 and number 2. No surprise. Data validation, almost 70% of you.
Actually, what's interesting there, Don, is that more people are reading. Is it reading?
More people are writing than reading. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So cool. Okay.
Geometry validation, 55%. Okay, so I better hide this. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so now that we've done all that sort of homework. Let's get on with the good stuff. Yep. So what we've got here is I'm going to bring up a workspace that's got a lot of interesting things that we can talk about in it, and we're going to see if any of this will make life easier for you working with your databases. So let me bring up my FME 2012 Service Pack 3. Let me just make it bigger because I know you can't read any of this, so I'm going to just zoom in here. I've got a number of bookmarks here that are doing different things, and so we'll step through each of these bookmarks to take a look at what the kinds of things you are able to do with your interaction between your external data and your database. So the first thing we're going to look at is throwing some AutoCAD data into your Oracle spatial data. This bookmark here is AutoCAD to Oracle. I'm going to turn on my Oracle writer here so that you'll see my little feature classes here come up and be enabled. And what we've got here is some water information data, and I'll show you what it looks like. Let's take a look at this data because we're going to be working with it throughout the morning. Okay, so pretty standard AutoCAD stuff, right? A bunch of line work, a bunch of text. So if we zoom in here, we can see that these red little blobs here are rather messy text done by whoever drew this particular diagram. So when you take this kind of data into Oracle, Oracle doesn't understand about text. So right away you think you're going to lose that text information. When we load that sort of data into Oracle, what we do, and it's the same with SQL Server and PostGIS also, none of them really understand text data. And so when we take them into those major databases, what you get is a point feature, and we extract some of the useful information like the actual text string, and we'll store that for you in the database. Yeah. So we pull in text string, the rotation of the text, because you can see this text is turned on its side. And basically when you're pulling stuff into your big databases, what you most likely are going to need to do is to put it back out again, back into AutoCAD. So there's a number of these kind of information about the data that you're going to want to store in your database so that next time when you pull it back out to AutoCAD, you've got that right information, right?
Yeah, because in CAD they quite often use the presentation to encode, real information, whereas in a database you want to put that in attributes. Yeah.
That's right. So things like the text rotation or the text height or the text string, that's very important. You can take those over and store them in your database as user attributes. In my case here, I also want to bring in color and layer, so it's very easy for me to modify my Oracle and add some additional attributes like color, which is going to be an integer type field. So I've got all the types, the data types here that Oracle will support for me, and then layer. And again, pick a different kind of data type based on the fact that I'm writing out to my Oracle database. So as I add attributes to my destination table, then I can connect up information coming from my source and store that into my database in its correct places. Mm-hmm. So that's the sort of way we might handle text when we're writing to an enterprise database. Now,
if I had an existing scheme in a database, could I just load that into Workbench and then just use that?
Absolutely, and we even have up on our writers here, we can import a feature type, so when you bring it in from, the DBA has got a very fixed idea of what his database table should look like, and we can bring that in for you. And so there's various other things here too. We've got line work here. Well, the line work will come across. We have a bunch of attributes on that line work, and that also will go into a separate table. And then the third thing that we saw in our data here were these little nodes where we've got water meter information. And so these little nodes will also get taken in to our database as point features. So we see these water nodes here being
so you renamed the tables too as it was brought in.
Yeah, we renamed the tables that was brought in, and we want to save information like the block name that was used for that water node, water meter, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so again, we expose the different format attributes and take them across into our database. Of course, while those things are red, nothing's going to happen, so we have to make sure that we connect them up so that data is actually flowing through our ports there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got our Oracle databases over here, and if you take a look at my workspace here, I've got all kinds of different connections going on. I've got a couple of instances of Oracle happening, and I've got one more over here. And I wanted to publish the password so that the user didn't have to encode the password into my workspace here, so that when I do a prompt and run, I have to enter these passwords, right?
Okay.
But the problem with this workspace is I've got to enter it a bunch of times, right? So is there any way I can get around having to do this, enter these passwords every time I run this workspace? Multiple times?
Great question. I'm sure hoping there is.
Well, I can do that here with these published parameters. So let me just get rid of the default ones that come up, and we'll just create a published parameter that's going to ask for a database password. The nice thing about published parameters, we've even got a password option here. So when I type into that box, it's going to do the same thing that you would expect and hide the password from me. So let me give it a name and a nice friendly prompt.
Yeah.
And we could give it a default value of Tom, for instance. And now if I go and run this workspace, you'll see that it just prompts me once for the password. I can enter in the correct value. It's hidden from me, and my workspace would run. Yeah. Except the problem was I didn't actually link my password through to that published parameter. Right. So one of the options I've got here is to link to a user parameter, and I can do that and pick up my password. Okay, so let's just try running this workspace to make sure that all my database connections are all working, and we'll take a look and see what happens. So as Workspace runs, you get a log file here that's showing a whole bunch of stuff happening. Looks like things are going fairly well along here. It's creating indexes for me. And if I go and take a look, I've got a SQL developer tool here that is a tool for looking at my Oracle database from an Oracle point of view. And so here are my the three tables that I just created: water lines, water meters, and water nodes. And if we take a look at the columns of those tables, you'll see that we've got a geometry column here using the SDO geometry type, right?
Yeah.
And of course we filled it up with a bunch of data, so we've got data in here.
Yeah.
Cool.
Excellent.
So that's just a simple translation using a fairly simple format, but what we can move on and take a look at is how we could add some value to our tables as we are trying to create them. So down here we've got another example that we can just quickly work through, where we take some city parks data. Let's take a look at it. It's very simplistic data. The NEDA is not going to be too happy about you putting this kind of data into their database, because the only attributes you've got a name and an alternate name. So neither of those makes for a very good primary key or an index or any of that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is, what they want us to make the table look more like is something along the lines of this, with a primary index, give them decent names, add a bit of value by calculating the area of the parks, this sort of thing. So in this case, we're actually going to be using a PostGIS writer. So just to show how simple it is, we can turn on our PostGIS writer.
So you're having one workspace write to Oracle and PostGIS at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and what's more, I can link that same PostGIS password through to my user password, so that they don't even have to...
so you can make the password the same.
Exactly.
Wow. This is shameless use of databases, really.
It is, actually, because really who would have the same password on all their databases? But you never know about that.
Probably me.
Yep, me too. Makes life easier. Yeah. So the first thing I want to do is create a primary index. So somehow or other I need to count these features as they come in. And one of the beauties and the powers of FME is the transformation tool. So one of the tools that we've got is a counter tool. And so I can add a counter in here and set it to create for me that primary index field.
How about if I want to do something crazy like create a GUID? Would we be able to do that?
Creating GUIDs, that's just as easy as creating primary indexes. We've got a UUID generator there. So in fact, yes, we could have done that kind of thing to get.
If we wanted to.
Yeah, rather more complicated.
Sure.
But now we want to calculate park area. So can you guess what we might have that would use?
Well, I would probably type area.
That's a good start.
Oh.
Look at that. We could be building our areas.
So I don't even have, so basically if I type what I'm looking for, FME tries to help me.
It does, you know, and I could have even just typed calculate and see what came up. And you'll see we got a different sort of list. But
how come some of them have that down arrow? What's that about?
Well, you know that better than me. That's our new and fancy.
Oh, FME store. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So that's another webinar, but anyway.
Yes. Yeah. So what those are special transformers that people have built for things that are missing, they feel are missing from the product. And so they've put a little bunch of useful transformers together into a custom transformer. And those are available from our central download site.
Yeah, so if you clicked on them, they would just right in Workbench, they would come down.
Exactly. So here we've added another transformer to calculate our park area. And then finally, we need to do some renaming here. And so I'm going to use an attribute copier to copy my original name of that attribute through to this new name that we want in the database. And anyone that's working with databases will be making fairly extensive use of that attribute copier or attribute renamer transformer, because often your source doesn't match your destination, right?
Right.
Your table will have some kind of fixed schema, and you need to be able to take those attributes that are coming in from your source and rename them to whatever it is that your destination needs.
Yeah.
And of course, the other problem with PostGIS, although it's not necessarily a problem, is that they work fairly exclusively in lowercase attribute names. And so often, if your data is coming from shape where it's uppercase, you'll have to make use of something like that. The other great thing about the PostGIS writer is we can do primary indexing, so we can put primary keys onto fields. That capability is also available in SQL Server.
Yeah.
So not all the databases do that, but PostGIS is one of them that does. Okay. The other thing that we can do with the PostGIS writer is that we can do a bulk copy insert. So that's something that makes the load work really fast, is that you can put that bulk copy on there. And so that also is being added to the other
SQL Server in 2013.
That's right.
I tell people it's 1,000 times faster.
I know,
but I think it's only 600 times.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, we can run our little workspace, and then we can go and check that it's actually created it in PostGIS for us. So I have a PG admin running here. Now, why is it taking so long this time? It was working much better before. So I have, again, if those of you work with PostGIS, your database tool looks like, I have my little schema here, which I can refresh. And by the time I've refreshed it with any luck, that table will be written.
There goes post now.
We'll open up our tables, and there's my city park table with its, whoops, we need to refresh it, with its columns. And again, one of these is a geometry column, as you would expect, because we wrote out geometry. If we'd used the PostGIS writer, we wouldn't have got that geometry.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show in this workspace is going from non-spatial data to spatial data. So I have another bookmark here where we have some non-spatial information. So in my Oracle database, I happen to have an address points table here, and if we take a look at the columns, you'll see there's no geometry in here. It's all just bar charts and numbers and stuff like that.
Yep.
But what we do have in here is a couple of columns that are coordinate values. So we've got some X and some Y data.
Yep.
This is very common, that people think their point data is geometry when really all it's got is a single column or a double column, X and Y or Latin long, and then they want to get it into a spatial database or view it with spatial tools, and you can't do that while it's looking like this. People have these kind of options in spreadsheets, Excel is a very common format, even just text files or your enterprise database. So what we want to do with this particular table is we've been tasked to take it into SQL Server Spatial. So we've added yet another writer into our workspace. I'm just going to enable these. We've got an Oracle reader, so we're reading from Oracle, and this time we're writing to SQL Spatial.
Wow.
Again, let's link those passwords up so that we've got good stuff happening with passwords. And you'll notice that when we do this kind of linking, they've given us a table in a SQL Server Spatial database that doesn't look as much like our source as we thought it was going to. So there's lots of attributes there that aren't going to be showing up in our table. And the first thing you notice, we've got a few red ports there. So this table would have been brought in by using that import from the database.
Yep.
So let's add an attribute copier in here to get these attributes joined up. And we can take over things like our primary index. We're going to pull it out of that Oracle table and call it our address ID in our SQL table. And again, this is very common mapping schema from a source to a destination.
Right, right.
Particularly from one format to another.
Now, if I wanted to map, say, hundreds of these, is there a transformer that I could drop down that could rename a whole bunch of attributes? Maybe I could use an Excel spreadsheet to do this mapping?
Yeah, there is actually. We have a transformer out there called the Schema Mapper, which when you're doing a big translation like this, you would use for this sort of thing. And it will, then you can read your mapping from some sort of external format. CSV or even a database, that kind of stuff. So once we've got our attribute names all okay, we've then got to make sure we turn this stuff into spatial data. And we have a transforming tool for doing that, something that we can use to turn our data into 2D points. Very easy 2D point, if I can spell it, 2D point replacer transformer, brings our data down into here. And again, we just need to give it the names of those attributes that are holding those values for us.
Yeah.
So here we've got our X coordinate, and here we've got our Y coordinate.
Now, what if I just had addresses? Is there any geocoding?
Yeah, there is actually. You could have done, perhaps off our street name, we could have concatenated our street name together so that we had a valid street name, and then we have a geocoding transformer.
So we could have used, so we could have used like the Yahoo geocoding service or DMTI or whatever.
Yep, there's one in here called the Proxix geocoder. So variety of those sort of different things.
Yeah.
And then of course the good old DBAs that are managing the SQL spatial database, they wanted this spatial database to be in geography format because SQL, of course, can do geometry and geography, right? So we set the writer up to write to the geography format.
So geography, to be clear, is like a round world format. It's not a flat plane format.
Yeah. And so the coordinate system for that will be this lat long 84, right?
Yeah.
But when we looked at our data, we just know that those, well, we didn't actually look at it, but we should have looked at it, and we can see that those XY columns aren't anything like lat long values, right?
Yeah.
So what we need to do before we can load that data is reproject these so that they're in the right coordinate system.
And you happen to know what the coordinate system is?
I do. Whoever looks after this data was good enough to tell me that what the coordinate system value is. So I have a coordinate system set of transformer I can throw in here to set the coordinate system of those features as they come through into a Texas state plane 83-CF coordinate system.
Wow.
Then when it writes it out, will reproject it from that coordinate system into your lat long and put the data into our database.
So FME does that automatically because the table is LL84, so it knows just to do that.
Yeah, and if you didn't transform it, of course, you would fail on when you went to add the data.
Right.
So we can see that. So if we take a look in our SQL Server database, I'm not going to run this workspace, but we'll see that we've got our address points in there. And if we take a look at them, we can look at the top 1,000 rows, although I personally like to show you the top 5,000 because it's a little bit more interesting. We'll make this a little bit bigger. And SQL Server 2008 has this great spatial result so that you can check that your data actually is where you said it was going to be. And so here you can see that it did write it in with the geography spatial column. And if you zoom in a bit, if I can find the zoom tool, we could see that it's very hard to see on the screen, but you'll see the lat longs. And you can bring it in.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, very nice.
Okay. So that's our first workspace, and that does a whole lot of stuff for us. And one last thing, of course, we got the data all in there, and then the DBA said, well, you weren't supposed to bring in the inactive addresses, so how come you didn't pick that up? So what we've
slow.
Yeah, well, on our Oracle, what we've got on our Oracle reader is the ability to throw in a where clause, where we can say, I only want particular parts of this information. And so I could have said, I only want where the status of this address is not equal to, we don't want just the inactive ones. And then that would have narrowed down my search on the reader. And the beauty of that is that it puts the work back into the database so that it's much faster for everybody that's involved. So
so that's a much more efficient approach than reading them all and then having a test filter in FME to do it. It'll let the database do its thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so again, in SQL Server, we can do things like put up primary keys in here. We can index fields if we want. We've got a variety of different options here. Which also brings up the fact that this zoning attribute was actually linked to another table. There were only certain values for zoning, and that we wanted to make sure that it didn't break any foreign key constraints. But because we were doing a bulk load, we wanted to turn that off. We weren't, the zoning table was a bit out of date, and we didn't want it to fail some of our good data. So one of the other alternatives that's available on many of our readers and writers is the ability to run a SQL statement before you execute the translation. And so what I was able to do here was turn off that constraint checking. So we turn it off, we load the data, And then after we've run the translation, we can turn it back on again. So we have the ability here to run a second one that's turning my constraint back on.
Yeah.
And again, that capability, so much of this is available on all of them. So you can do this on Oracle, you can do this on PostGIS, anything that you want.
Yeah. Good.
Cool.
Wow, so that's reading and writing.
Yes, pretty much done to death, huh?
Yeah, and pretty much, one of the things is that I didn't have to know much about any particular database. They all look pretty much the same.
They look much the same. But if you are familiar with your databases, then, for Oracle here, we handle workspace management, so we do that. We've got a writer mode on here. We could have done updates or inserts or whatever.
Right.
So what I'll send you when you get your output is the completed workspace, and you can take a look at these different transformers if you didn't happen to catch it all.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm dying to see what you're going to do with the raster. I know you got a raster in there.
I did, but you know what? I was thinking we're running out of time, and I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
Do you want to do it?
But we could have.
It's very easy. All I had to do was just add a writer. You see, I was going to use this to show how to add a writer to my workspace.
Well, now that I've asked, we probably should.
We should.
Since also there was 30% of the people who are writing rasters, and so we wouldn't want them to do something with rasters. We wouldn't want them to go away disappointed.
No. So let me just pull up the right combination of words to find our raster. So in Oracle, we support this spatial georaster format. So you can see here all the different kinds of Oracle that we actually have writers for.
Right. Point
cloud, but georaster. And I need to just tell it where it's going to go to. So we're connecting to this database of mine that's got everything in it. And it's as easy as this. So we pull in the writer. It adds a feature type for us. We let all that just default. And all that we need to do then is connect it up.
And that's it.
And that's it. I'm not going to run this workspace because my computer's a little bit old and it takes a little while to do it. But we can take a look at what that would look like if we saw it in our Oracle. Now, once we get it into the database, and it's actually there already, if we take a look, we can see this granule here is our raster. You can see the kind of geometry we're getting for it.
Yeah.
But I don't actually know how you view it out of Oracle. So with our universal viewing tool, we can pull it in here and take a look at it.
Right.
So we've got the ability here to do Oracle georaster reading. Go get that particular file. And again, this is how you would, all the database readers and writers do the same thing. You set up your connection, go read the tables, pick the table of interest, and bring it into our viewer.
Right.
And of course, this is a JPEG, so it'll load it up. It's doing some sampling, pixel settings, stuff. Loads it up like that for us.
Look at that.
Database. Yep. Do we want to veer off into the data inspector? If we take a look at the data inspector, which is our new viewing tool, I had this set up so that we could actually have a look at a point cloud and fly around it.
Perfect.
So we have here.
So we can load point clouds into Oracle too, is what you're saying?
I am. And what's more is we can read them back out again. So here's an Oracle Special Point Clouds coming in. We can turn it into 3D mode.
Yeah.
And then we can zoom in a little bit here.
Yeah.
And we can fly around it.
Yeah.
And we'll see that, yes, it is actually pointy up above the flat. That kind of stuff. Yeah, so the data inspector, great for looking at your 3D data, data viewer.
Yeah, and in 2013, it's going to have a table view too. So if you're looking at non-spatial data, you'd be able to actually use a data inspector to inspect it.
Excellent.
Wouldn't
We've
that
been
be exciting?
waiting for a long time for that.
Yes.
Non-spatial tool. Cool. So, that's reading and writing.
Wow.
Now we've got to rush through the rest of this stuff. So, database transformers. I'm not going to do all of these little demos, but again, when you get your package, they'll have all the workspaces that's associated with it.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of, these are the database transformers, very specific for your database.
Yeah.
SQL executors, SQL creators.
Yeah.
We said you weren't going to have to know SQL.
So those links all go to something when people get these?
Yep, they do. So the SQL creator, you can actually use complicated join statements in that transformer, and it will create features for you that then will pass into your workspace. The executor you can use to do SQL executes, so something like turning off those foreign constraints we could have done with an executor.
Yeah.
Updating a field, for instance, at the end of your translation, you can do that way. So.
Yeah.
More interesting are the feature reader and the joiner transformers. Those allow you to go out and read from a database or a file in the middle of a workspace. So,
if I was reading like states and then I want to know all the minor roads or major roads in a state, I could then use a joiner to go get those.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And a feature reader will allow you to do sort of a spatial interaction, spatial overlay kind of thing. So there's that sort of stuff. So we put together here next was a workspace that's doing your quality assurance, so your data validation stuff. And we're using a number of those database transformers in this kind of workspace for doing this. And so one of the first things we want to do is take a look at our valid geometry. So again, I'm working with this this line work data. Let me just go back to what it looked like. Sorry, it has to redraw that particular one before I can flick out of there.
Our new data inspector is so much better.
Is it?
Yeah.
I hope so.
I do too.
Yeah. Cool. So, sorry, that's just going to take too long. In a minute, we'll go back to there and
just kill that view.
Let's kill that view. Get rid of that one. We'll go and have a look. So we're working with this line work out of our water distribution network. So just the line work, and we need to validate it to make sure that it's good, because you know what those DBAs are. They don't like data going into their database without it being perfect.
That's right.
So we're going to use some.
And I'm betting some people out there have had to deal with bad data.
I would think so. You know, most of the time it's pretty good, but just every so often it's not so good.
That's right.
So some of the tools that you can use for data validation, we've got a geometry validator here that does geometry validation. And if you take a look in the help for that particular transformer, it'll look for things like nested holes or self-intersections, duplicated rings, stuff like that. And so again, in 2013, we've improved that.
Oh, greatly.
A whole lot, because the big thing it wouldn't do was 3D, right? I think.
That's right. And the new one also, it'll tell you what ones. You can also have it auto repair, but then it will tell you which ones have changed.
All of that sort of good stuff.
I get excited just thinking about it, actually.
So we can check for valid geometry by using something like that, geometry validator. Checking for attribute values, not quite so tricky. You can just do things with testing transformers. So I can look for all the cases where the diameter of my pipe is equal to 0, or where the diameter of my pipe is empty. So things like this. I've got negatives here. I can negate those statements and join them together with ands. You know how it is once you start to negate things. It gets a little bit more complicated. I can also do things with my testers that I can look for null attributes. So my materials that the pipe is made out of, maybe they come in as nulls, and that's an illegal value, so I can test for null attributes there.
I did not know that.
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of new things happening on this operator that came in 20.
I really like the begins with, ends with, existence,
and contains and likes and all that.
That's good.
So that's some fairly basic attribute value checking. I could have joined those two together into there's a better transformer for doing nested tests like that.
So if I negated like, it could be I don't like?
That's right, yeah. I like the test filter transformer because it can do that sort of thing for me. So then I could use a joiner. My materials, I have a code reference table out there that says the material for the pipe has to be one of these kind of values. So to find that out as the transformer is passing through, I can throw in the joiner, right, and take a look at it. So my joiner transformer does
So I could even use the joiner to join data from one database to another. So I could be reading a PostGIS database but join to a SQL Server database?
Well, yeah. So here I've got AutoCAD data coming in, and I'm joining it to a Postgres table in my Postgres to check that the materials are all valid. Yeah, exactly. And then the last one of these is the feature reader transformer, which does a very similar kind of thing. And in our feature reader here, we're trying to make sure that the data is in the area that we're interested in. There's no point bringing that data into the database if it happened to be in Houston, Texas instead of Austin, Texas, right? So
and I guess the difference between the feature reader and the joiner is the joiner always hits a database, whereas a feature reader could hit a database, but it could hit any other format we support as well.
That's right. And the beauty of it, too, is that you can actually do that spatial relationship. So here I'm doing an Oracle contains. Is my data that's coming in contained in the area of interest, right? So that's pretty cool. And so what I can do when I run this is that all of these will go out to a viewer and show us some of the problems that there might be in our data. So it runs pretty quickly. It's checking all this good stuff. And we like to do this before we load this data into our database because it's bad to get bad data.
So if there's bad data, nothing's loaded into the database.
That's right, because you can see we've got everything coming through to our viewer, and we can see these bad features. So see over here, I've got invalid geometries, missing materials, stuff that it's all being colored differently, and it's got the test that it failed.
So if somebody was collecting this data, they would just have to bring it back to the shop then?
That's right.
And,
or,
yeah.
you know, I was just veering off into your area here, but we could take this data and actually write it out to an HTML. So I've modified my little workspace here to throw in some XML transformers, so that we can get our data into a format that we can look at or pass to somebody on a web page. So if we take a look here, the output from this particular workspace, if I remember where I put it, is HTML. And so if we look at what it looks like, here are the failures for our workspace.
Wow.
So this could be something that might be useful to you. You could have the workspace create this HTML. You could send your CAD guy to this particular page and say, look, guy, you fixed this stuff up. It's not very good.
Yep.
I can't put it into my database.
Yeah.
So that's done with a combination of those particular transformers that have to do with working with the databases. Feature reader, joiner, and a geometry validator. The last one here, the inline query, I'm not going to show because we're getting tight for time, but the inline querier is a way of reading from a number of different tables, and we actually take all the data and put it into a little SQLite database.
Yep.
And then we allow you to work with really complicated SQL statements to pull that, massage that data whichever way you want, and output it into the different destinations that you've got going there. So
no, it's new. Yeah, it's very powerful. Enables you to build a database within your workspace and then use it. Replaces if you've been using the feature merger in the past, and then this is definitely worth looking at, particularly if you have nested feature mergers.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so the inline query are new to 2012, and it also allows you to work with your multiple tables in a way faster format.
Yeah.
So some of the database functionality that we can make use of when we're working with FME is all these things. So a sequence, the sequence column, Oracle calls it a sequence, SQL Server calls it an identity column, PostGIS calls it a serial column. You could have come up with the same name for them all.
Yeah.
But what we can do is, for instance, it's very easy to work with these kind of columns, and in fact we could go back to our PostGIS example here where we were having to create that primary index, right? And we had to put a counter transformer in here to create our unique primary indexes. But we can actually get rid of that transformer, and we can go in here to our destination and just turn that primary index attribute into a serial.
Oh, wow.
And so that serial then will be generated for you automatically, and we don't even have to hook anything up to it.
Yeah.
And then when we run it, it will automatically generate that serial for us, and we'll be able to see it in our database.
Perfect.
And the same thing's possible in SQL Server. We can use that an identity field, or Oracle's a little bit different. It's handled a little bit different, but it's basically the same idea.
Yep.
So database triggers. Triggers can be used to perform all sorts of powerful processing. You can use a trigger to execute an FME workspace, or even to pump something through to an FME server task. So do you just want to spend a minute on what FME server is compared to desktop?
Sure. And then desktop primarily is the authoring environment, and then you can run these jobs as part of a batch system. What FME server does is enable you to share this workflow across your organization. It also enables you to automate things, comes with scheduling capabilities. And from a database standpoint, one thing we could do, just thinking about that QA flow, is it would be very easy to have a workflow where somebody in the field creating that QA drawing we saw could even email it to FME Server. FME Server would run the workspace and then email them back a response. So
that's right.
So FME Server is all about automation. There's other things, real-time sensors, all that stuff, but primarily it's about automating your tasks and making them available across your enterprise.
Yeah, and the beauty of triggers is that you've really got some tremendous power there for doing this kind of stuff. So here we've set up a very, so I consider it to be a fairly complicated trigger because I'm not really great with triggers, but here what it's doing here is actually submitting something to the job submitter on one of our running FME servers. So you can see that's done. So every time a waterline is inserted into our database, this trigger fires up. So that's one use of triggers. Another use of triggers might be to, when you're inserting data into one of your production tables, you want to have a delta table created. And so you can use triggers to create delta tables by putting together a trigger that looks something like this. I think you could even use triggers to send tweets, can't you?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. So stored procedures are nothing that you can use from within a workspace, or actually use a stored procedure to run a workspace. And we've got a little stored procedure here that's in our SQL Server database, and it's just doing a join of a couple of tables. So we could put that kind of execution of a stored procedure into a workspace. And I think possibly I even have one that does that. If I go back to my slideshow, I probably have a pointer for it. Yep. And so what we're doing here is using a SQL Creator transformer to execute a stored procedure. So very simple little bookmark here, SQL Creator, that we didn't actually look at before, and what it's doing is executing a SQL statement. So it's executing your stored procedure. Very simple. And you can tell it which attributes you want to expose.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, so also continuing on with that, we've got transactioning. So all of our writers will work with transactioning. So you can tell it how many features you want to write into memory or read into memory per transaction, how many you want to write around a commit. So you can commit on every feature, you can commit on every 1,000 features. So you can do rollbacks, that kind of stuff. So all the stuff that the enterprise database people like to know about.
Good.
We also have multi-geometry support. So there's, again, you'll get a couple of little workspaces that show how to deal with multi-geometry columns. That's quite interesting to see how we put it together using aggregates and named geometries. So we line up the names of the geometries in the feature with the name of the column that is held in the database. Okay, so the thing we really wanted to get to was our sneak peek at FME 2013. So these are all the new things that I can find on our What's Great in 2013 that are coming down the pipe for databases.
Wow. Well, PostGIS 2.0 is very exciting.
Yes, and raster reading.
That's right, because it adds raster, and so we're going to have that. So if you want to try that, check out FME 2013, the beta, from our website, and then please try it and let us know how it goes. SQL Server, of course, support for Denali, which is SQL Server 2012 edition. Also bulk updates for improved speed on load. And if you're using SQL Server Azure, that's the Microsoft SQL Server in the cloud, and then the bulk updates really is critical because, like I mentioned, it's about 600 times faster. and Paul has written a great blog article there. If you click on that link when you get this slide deck, or go to our blog, you'll find it from our website. Then you'll see it there, blog.safe.com.
He's explained what all the good things are in SQL Server 2013, and of course in SQL Server 2012, for which you need FME 2013.
Yeah.
And for Oracle, we added this persistent connection, which was great because if you're doing stuff with an Oracle reader, an Oracle writer, a feature reader, and an SQL executor, it's now using the same connection, so you can keeping the connection open so that you don't have that.
Yeah, that's a big deal on server. Yeah.
And then language settings. There was quite an issue with decimal separators.
That was exactly. That's a big one.
New and improved transformers, the geometry validator we mentioned before. It's got all kinds of great stuff in there, and then the joiner we've updated a little bit too.
Yeah, so for joins that are one to many now, the experience is much better, and performance again is huge. Huge.
How much faster, Don?
Well, some of these operations are 2 orders of magnitude faster. So like we talked about the bulk capability of SQL Server, so that's 2 orders of magnitude faster. The joiner too, if you're doing a one to many, maybe you're doing a one feature in and you want 1,000 features out. In the past, that would be returned to you via a list mechanism in FME. Now you have the option of doing it in a different way where we're not building the list. So again, 2 orders of magnitude faster. So we're pretty excited about 2013.
Yeah, so then the last little thing I just wanted to show you was we've got this really nifty real-time display where we're doing that quality assurance process and updating an enterprise database and making use of FME Server with some email and notification services, some database triggers and some stored procedures. And so this is a little demo here showing you what our what is possible with FME 2013. So I'm just going to check that our database is ready here. And what I'm able to do is send in a file. Yeah. And I can send in a bad one to start with, and we'll just check what, So here's my handiwork.
Yeah. Very
and
good.
send this off and just see what happens to my.
That's right. And you can see that the address there was CAD Water QA. What you can do with Server is associate the email address with different tasks on Server. So in this case, it was a Water QA that we want to do for our water net. Oh, what happened?
It failed. So let's have a look at what it showed me. And you'll see that, sure enough, we've put together an HTML document.
Complete with maps.
With maps showing us which particular line is
and
incorrect.
Where on it. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
So you can see we got close to doing this part of this process, but the full example has added these little maps to the side. And so you can see invalid attributes here and invalid geometry.
And this is just one demonstration of FME Server showing how this QA task is available to anybody via this email address. And because that data failed, it was not loaded into the database.
Exactly. So now we're going to try again with a file that we hope will make it in. We send it back to the CAD guy, and he's fixed a bunch of those geometries and those bad attributes. And we'll get him to try this one. And you'll notice that it doesn't care what my subject is. I can type anything in there.
That's right.
So we'll try this one out. And see what happens.
Yeah. Now, FME Server could do different things based on a subject if you wanted. Basically, this whole email body, subject, from, all this stuff is part of what FME Server could do. So you could even have the workspace ensure that the from address is only valid people, and if it was somebody else who was trying to submit data, you could reject it. So you could have a list of the valid email addresses and only allow those people to submit the data. So you're able to do things like that. So Robin's going to.
I don't know why my attach is taking so long.
No.
Don't you just love these things? This always happens in demonstrations, right?
It's not even our technology, for crying out loud. This is Gmail.
Stuff. Yeah.
Just cancel
it.
Cancel
it and I'll
try
it again.
Hopefully our internet connection hasn't gone down. I can still see you moving here, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you've done the demo too many times.
Maybe maybe I wore
and,
that.
Gmail just says I don't want to load that file anymore.
Exactly.
There you go.
Let's send this off. So we'll sit over here and wait to see what happens on our webpage. But in the meantime, the sorts of things that this is making use of is.
So watch this screen. You'll notice Robin doesn't have to hit refresh, and this is showing again FME Server with HTML5. So a whole bunch of people could be watching this, and you can see it come in. So this is as the data is added to the database, we're seeing it now loaded into the this screen in a real-time display, and it's using HTML5. So
that's right, and basically it's running a workspace that looked very similar to the one we put together to do that quality assurance task. There's a little bit of WebSockets and a little bit of Java around
I think
it.
it's like 12 lines.
Yeah, nothing terribly expensive.
Yeah, but the whole, now if Robin goes back to the email, she'll see there, the whole email aspect, other than the real-time display, was done with writing no code at all on the back end, purely just workspaces, and the ones that Robin showed earlier.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we're up to.
I think we're almost done here, aren't we?
We are. Oh, we have.
You can win.
The last of our poll questions is. Because you've sat through our hour of interesting information, we hope that you'd like to take some training, and so we are going to. Don's going to fire up a poll here, asking if you'd like to win some training.
Yeah.
And
you know, being Canadians, we have yes and yes please, and no and no please. And
I know.
And surprised me is I'm not sure what happens if you pick that one, to be honest. But
I didn't know.
Anyway, that's funny. So so thanks again for your time here this morning. And you know, this is really obviously just a huge high-level overview. But if there's a database problem, really, we're up to the task, aren't we?
Right. So you've got until September the 30th to register. So you can just close that poll.
Look
You're
at
not
that.
supposed to share this one.
Oh, wasn't I?
No. We don't want anyone to know how many people didn't say thanks on their yeses.
Oh, well, nobody said no.
Oh, that's
Everybody said no, thanks. Okay, sorry about that. Well, I better hide that now.
Yeah. So limited time offer. You've got until the end of the month to register. Take a look at the offerings that are available to you online. So what's next? You can ask for a personalized web demo through our sales@safe.com. You can try FME Desktop by downloading a trial. We've got another webinar coming up at the end of October on exchanging data between CAD and GIS systems, and that's a really interesting webinar if you're interested in that sort of stuff. But more importantly, next week we've got the first of two database courses coming up.
Okay, and they're online?
They're online courses. It's a 4-hour course, and you can use your free training offer for that. The first one's on Oracle, so it's based around the Oracle database. The second one's on SQL Server. You'll learn to do things like updating your data within your database that we didn't touch.
Yeah.
you go over all the points we covered this morning much slower, so
Yeah.
that you've got
Yeah.
more time to take them all in. So take a look on the website and line up for that sort of stuff. We used up all our question and answer time, but I'm hoping that you fired questions at Paul and
yeah,
Dan.
I'm sure they've been busy answering them. That would be my guess.
Feel free to continue firing for the next few minutes.
Yeah, they've been.
But most of all, we want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for attending, and the webinar recording link and email will be sent to you shortly. If you've got any more questions, info@safe.com, or of course our support line, www.safe.com/support.
Yeah. And remember the restaurant model, please do make use of our support, whether you're just evaluating or if you are a current client or partner, as we refer to them.
Yep.
We love the questions, and we can save you a lot of time. So don't struggle. Just send us a question, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
That's right. Yep. Great. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
And
I like the 8-track tape.
exactly. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Great. Okay.